Hello, Thiago. Thank you so much for doing this. It's going to be one of those curious episodes where two Brazilians that speak Portuguese will talk in English. But let's start. Let me start asking you where you were born, where you are right now, and maybe some anecdote story connecting the two places.
It's great. But Mauro, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Speaking in English, it will slow us down, but hopefully it'll still be interesting the entire conversation.
Yes.
So I'm originally from Brasilia, right, the capital of Brazil, and right now I'm in São Paulo. So I've been working in São Paulo for almost 20 years now. So I was born in Brasilia. I studied there. My mother was a university professor there in Brasilia. My father a public servant, although they were originally from Rio de Janeiro. So all my vacations and all that were spent in either Rio or Vitória in Espírito Santo, where part of my mother's family is from. Uh, I'm in São Paulo because it's the business capital of Brazil, right? So it's in some ways I was born in the political capital, and then I migrated to the business capital of Brazil. Um, and I think living there in Brasilia, my mother university professor, but it's a public university, right? My father a public servant. You're always kind of involved somehow in not in politics, but in policy, in public policy, thinking about government, how everything works, how you can actually improve the lives of people. So actually, my first job out of university was working with Ruth Cardoso, the former wife of the late wife, actually, of President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, in NGO, which was actually part of the social program of Fernando Henrique Cardoso, which was a literacy program called Alfabetização Solidária, translated to English, kind of like solidarity in literacy.
Yeah.
So I was always like interested in having kind of like impact in people's lives, but kind of towards the end there, I was seeing that if you want to have like real impact in people's lives, there is a direct way, like through literacy, but there is an indirect way, but which is also very, very big, which is through the private sector. And improving private sector, improving the economy. So I went actually to work at McKinsey. So I worked there kind of 5 years at McKinsey. And then I founded Guia Bolso, which was the largest personal finance management platform in Brazil. And it, since then, I've been always working from São Paulo, which is, if you think about how you want to impact and develop Brazil, I think the economy and the private sector are certainly kind of the way to go forward there.
Well, Thiago, I'm somehow interested in and how the place where you choose to live and work and impact or is impacted by the professional choice that you make in a way that does it make easier or is it harder to do what you want to do being where you were or where you are? So it's from what you said, moving to São Paulo, it was like less of an option and more of a requirement, right? If you want to do what you wanted to do. And so do you see this, how can I say it? Is it a good, a bad thing, or it's a fact of life that some places become hubs and they attract people, and maybe that's the way it should be. And of course, São Paulo is a hub in Brazil. Do you have thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, no, I do have some thoughts, and it's interesting because we're still in the pandemic, right? So it's interesting how like you had to be in São Paulo, but now it depends on the sector. You actually don't need to be here anymore, right? Because you can work remotely, and for a while, I was actually thinking that São Paulo and the way everything was drawn towards São Paulo was creating kind of a black hole where everything was drawn here. You would see other cities not developing as well. And so when we created Guia Bolso, a startup, we wanted to create in Rio de Janeiro. But like the investors wouldn't take it seriously if we were there. We wouldn't be having the meetings because you were supposed to be present. So it's somehow it was kind of the requirement to be in São Paulo because everything is in São Paulo, and since everything is in São Paulo, everything is built in São
Black
Paulo.
hole metaphor is great.
Exactly. So it's not a virtuous circle if you think about Brazil. It's it's quite the opposite. But now with the pandemic, I think there is a chance that things will kind of change, and we'll see other cities, the countryside developing much more, and through good jobs, high-paying jobs like the tech sector. So we have like plenty of developers. There are like these tiny small cities like in the middle of Northeast of Brazil, and it's interesting because in a way they kind of can create a small ecosystem of developers there. Each one of them, if they want to, they can help develop those regions and be like seeds of technology, of the technology sector is spreading around them. So and hopefully that's what's going to happen.
Yes. So like I'm very interested in this centralized, decentralized aspect. Like maybe because I'm so interested in blockchains recently. So the idea of centralized versus decentralized networks and how this play a role in the physical world, right? With cities, because yes, it's great to have a centralized place like São Paulo, but it comes at a cost, right? To move around São Paulo is terrible. The quality of the air in São Paulo is terrible. So a lot of good things, but at a high price.
That's right.
In other aspects. So Thiago, you came from this let's say family background of people devoted to the public sector. You chose to impact the world in the private sector, but how do you see the world today? Like, is it a better world than it was before? Is it worse? Do you think it's getting better over time, or it's getting worse?
No, I have no doubt that, like, if you look objectively, the world's much better. I have no doubt about that, right? If you look at like poverty-wise, health-wise, even we're in a pandemic. But imagine if we were in a pandemic, like right?
Yeah, 100 years ago.
We're much better. But now we have much more visibility about the bad things and the things that are not working. I think that's a lot of things that used to be hidden now are in your face. So the inequality is more. I think it's more aggressive somehow because it's right there. You can look. If you're swiping your phone, you see a lot of bad stories. So there's a lot of information coming at you, which wasn't the case back then. And I think there's a lot of misinformation as well, right? So you have plenty of access for information, but misinformation.
I
Not,
saw once.
not. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I saw Denzel Washington saying, like, if you read the newspaper, if you don't read the newspaper, you are uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you are misinformed. So, like,
yeah, and Mauro, you mentioned centralized versus decentralized. Before, we had access to information, but it was centralized information. So think about media, right? Oh, like I'm
yes,
watching TV. Yeah, it's like you have
channels.
5 channels, selecting what you're gonna see, what's the angle of the news. You have like 3 or 4 newspapers, very centralized. Now you have decentralized information. So it's different. But if you think about like the percentages, right? Because it's never black or white. It's all about the percentage. For me, like life is about percentages, not about binary, right? If you think about the health index, poverty index, if you think about people having misinformation, well, probably the percentage of people that were uninformed was much higher. Now you have more people being informed, some of them being misinformed. But is it worse than it used to be? I don't think so. And at the same time, or everybody was having access to only centralized information, where now if I'm completely addicted to YouTube. I've erased all the other social apps because I'm a highly addictive person.
Wow.
But YouTube got me, and that's because you have access to like long content, like in-depth content. So like there are like incredible YouTube channels, like science YouTube channels, like music YouTube channels, which you would never have access to that information before when you had this centralized media system. So I think we're in a much better situation now.
I agree with you. But when you look forward, what would be the challenges that you see for us to keep getting better?
Yeah. So well, there are many challenges. I think one is inequality. I think inequality is getting worse. So everybody is getting better somehow, but the gap was widening. So you have less people in a poor position, but you have much more people being very rich. So this gap, income gap, is kind of worries me. But at the same time, that means that there is wealth being created. So it's how you can actually distribute that wealth somehow. So it's how you create that mechanism where you keep the incentives of being an entrepreneur and things like that, right? So you don't want to do anything that disincentivizes someone to be an entrepreneur. Oh, if I'm successful, then all my money or a huge percentage of it will be distributed. So why am I going to take the risk of actually creating a company in Brazil specifically, being worried if I'm gonna be in debt after if the company doesn't succeed? So it's you need to create the right incentive. So I think inequality is one. I think that there is the second one, which is for me is the personal connection, which I think we're more and more connected to our gadgets and less connected to people around us, and that's because it's highly addictive, right? So smartphones, and And it's not that those technologies will get less addictive. They'll be more and more and more addictive. So I think um, um, I'm kind of concerned around that, and of course the implications of that. If you have a decentralized, although you have decentralized information, you still have a centralized algorithm, for example, that selects kind of the things that you're gonna watch and all that. It can be biased or not. We are not sure because those algorithms are not open. So I think those two main things I would put as so one is around the gap of inequality, and the second one is personal connection versus addictive behavior towards technology.
Yes, that, well, two very interesting topics, right? I remember reading in Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century how, like a lot of proposals on how to distribute wealth, but he's saying that entrepreneurship is the best way of creating new wealth and thus distributing it. So I fully agree with you. We have to keep incentivizing people to start up and to create wealth out of nowhere, right? And
Right.
the possibilities to create new wealth, or how they say, new money, with this, even with these challenges that we're facing ahead, so many opportunities.
Yeah,
Right?
and
And
maybe the remote work, just building on that, maybe the remote work can help distribute that. Again, like I mentioned, right? We have several developers in now spread across Brazil in smaller
we
regions.
can even say that technology in general, right? Because you reduce the need for infrastructure, right? And then you actually create the the opportunities. You end creating more opportunities because the barrier of entrance is reduced. As you know, like, you need a pair of one phone and you can start producing content and doing a lot of stuff as long as you have internet. So the great barrier now maybe could be internet access, and but even this is has improved a lot over the last year. I never heard someone talking about the challenge of the personal connections. And being a biologist, I know that our we are in this we have evolved our minds in 100,000 years, but our brain chemistry is much older than that. So I don't think it can really adapt in our lifetime.
No.
We are still so dependent on dopamine shots and serotonin and endorphin, and these algorithms, they learned how to supply us with this endless supply, of those dopamine shots. If we can go back to get our dopamine shots from personal connections, it's a very interesting question. Even though, like, I think those companies are also with predatory business models, right? And they are playing with our addiction to these dopamine shots. Maybe some incentive distribution, if you change the incentives there, we can get some control out of that.
Yeah.
Can get back some control.
Yeah. I think there are different theories that I've been hearing. So there is one Stanford professor that was suggesting that you should be able to create kind of a algorithm marketplace where you choose kind of like the type of algorithm, and everybody can like build different algorithms to filter out your feeds in different ways, and that should be decentralized development. So I think there are different ways to try to solve those things. But the idea of having so much power in just a few companies is and like so much information being filtered out there. It's I think it's an issue that we'll have to deal with it. Not now, but certainly soon.
Thiago, so you mentioned these two big challenges: inequality and personal connections. And knowing that you created this this company that help people manage their wealth, if I can say like this, or because in the end, managing their money, helping them to manage their personal budgets, their family budgets. It's in a way measuring, helping them dealing with their wealth. How do you see your role and this professional choice that you made, that in my opinion tackle, and not even so indirectly, right, very directly, these two topics of inequality and but because you do it in a digital way, with using apps, using technology, you can connect, you can help people maybe navigate through the chaos of information that's that they are immersed on.
Yeah. No, so it definitely, like, those things are tied, right? So when we created Guia Bolso back then, the idea was like, how can we combine like an interesting business model, an interesting economic model with helping people, and how can we actually improve the lives of Brazilians? So and the idea was quite simple. It was like, if well, people have to deal with money all the time. There are a lot of behavioral challenges when you deal with money, like and cognitive and psychological challenges when you deal with money. So how can we kind of organize and kind of unbias a lot of the decisions that people make around money? So that was kind of like the background when we created Guia Bolso. It evolved to like many things in along the way, and it was very clear to us that if we were to create that was in 2012 when we created Guia Bolso. If we were to create a company that wanted to scale, it had to be digitally. There was no way of creating like a traditional brick and mortar company back then. It would end up as looking like a bank and trying to compete with the bank in the traditional sense, which we knew it was very hard. So the idea was, let's create something that will help consumers. We'll use digital to scale, and that will tie improving the lives of people with an interesting business model. In the end, we were successful in many different ways in scaling the company, in creating impact. In the end, we were even more successful than we thought around transforming the financial ecosystem here in Brazil, because of the open banking. Because in the end, what we built in Brazil, it was open banking, although there was no name for that. and Mauro, as a scientist, you probably know that, right? If you can't name something, it almost doesn't exist, right? So we didn't have a name for what we were creating.
Yeah,
There wasn't
it makes the
a,
communication much more challenging.
yes, yes, yes. And we faced many challenges. In the end, the regulator came in, decided to regulate what we were doing, and created this infrastructure towards the ecosystem
And
where
I
you have to create
and I can
APIs.
see it, and I can see the smile on your face, like being proud of now you created something that has a name. Wow, open banking.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But it was a ride. It was a roller coaster ride because uh, getting to that point was very hard. There were many points where we thought we were going to be shut down, either by the government or either by other banks.
Yes.
And it got dangerous. Got close to that situation because we were sued by one of the largest banks here in Brazil. Um, then the government kind of intervened and helped us navigate through that, but in the end regulated, which also kind of took off some of the edge of what we were creating.
How
Go ahead.
with this experience in particular, so like we are living in a world where there's a lot of financial innovation, right? A lot. And this is very exciting for me. I used to be one of those people that thought that money was something boring. We needed to deal with it. Yes, we want more of it. Have to deal with it, but it was something boring. And but I started to see money as this battery of energy and time, and it started to be more valuable to me, more than just the of a means of transaction. Then I got much more interested in money, and I because of that I dived into it, and I started to see how it impacts our life, right? Not in the boring transaction things that daily things, but as this concept of storing your time and your energy and defining through opportunity costs what are your choices, and in the end having a great impact on your life. But it's highly regulated, and it has a lot of political angles. It's politicized. Maybe that's the right word. Money is politicized, and there are a lot of attempts to make money unpoliticize money. So to have money that is not politically connected, and then you bring all the challenges of regulation and everything. A lot of people that it's saying it's you cannot trust governments when it comes to your money, and so all these different angles emerging right now because of all this innovation in finance. So having participated in this process of creating something new, being attacked by the mainstream or the legacy technology, and having the government to come and somehow help you formalize and then regulating. How do you see this having a role in this better future?
Yeah. No. So
Governments and regulation, maybe the between governments and regulation and competition with legacy. How does this contribute to the future?
yeah. No. So there are many things there, right, Mauro? Like you mentioned, and there are even like other ways of thinking about money. Money is amazing. So one other way, just adding to your point of money being a way to store time, work, energy. Also a voting mechanism, right? you vote with your wallet. So what should continue, what shouldn't continue, what should grow, what shouldn't grow. You're voting with your wallet as well. So money is also a voting mechanism. And the way it is, it's also part of the government and part of the state responsibility, of course, of controlling the supply of money. And it's also trust, right? It requires trust. It's always in the end it's paper or bits and bytes, but it
represents trust.
That represents trust, because without trust, it's worthless, right? If I don't think that paper has any value, I'm not going to make a transaction and hold that money. So it represents a lot of things. So, but given that, there is also the side of like the ecosystem around it, right? And there are many things that you learn when you're dealing with the financial system in general. One is it has many impacts, so you have to deal with it with being very careful. Yeah, an entire economy depends on financial systems, right? So if one bank, we know all that, right? But if one bank fails, the
cascade effect.
So you have to be very careful. So that's one thing that you have to always be mindful about it. The second thing is, you're talking about big banks usually, right? You're talking about a lot of money involved and a lot of power as well. So those things are intertwined and they go hand in hand. So if you want to make changes there is innovation, but one way is also through regulation. Is the government? How will the government react here? And the government can actually do nothing and let innovation happen as very naturally. But the government may want to change kind of like infrastructure or even the pipes. So what's happening here in Brazil, for example, is that the central bank looked at the ecosystem and said, "Oh, we would like to see more competition." But are the pipes and the current regulation good and conductive towards more competition? And the reality that it wasn't, right? Because you had, like, for example, you had Citibank, you had HSBC coming here, big banks, international banks coming here in Brazil trying to compete, and they weren't able to compete because you had old pipes, you needed a physical distribution network through branches, very old school. And what the central banks looked at was like, we had to change the pipe. We have to change the pipes, and we have to foster a different type of player in innovation, which is tech-enabled, digital. So leaner players that will able to scale faster, will able to compete in a very efficient way. But the current pipes won't work for them. So making payments is expensive. Money transfers are expensive. Withdrawing money is expensive. Exchanging data is actually almost impossible. We were the only ones doing it, but they decided to create open banking, which kind of like enables the pipes for the data to flow. How you can actually do portability of different products. So the agenda of the central bank here in Brazil was very interesting, which was let's think about a new financial system with new pipes, with a new payment infrastructure, with a new data sharing infrastructure, with a different way to withdraw money. So it was interesting to look and be part of that process as well, and being very close actually to the regulator while they were thinking and actually implementing those different policies as well.
Interesting. Thiago, before I let you go, I have 3 questions that I ask everyone, trying to. Okay, so like they are rapid fire. You can do just yes or no, but you can elaborate also if you want. First, it's very simple. Which book you are reading right now?
So it's Escravidão, do Laurentino Gomes. So it's like slavery, right?
Yes, story of the slavery.
It's an in-depth story about slavery in Brazil. It covers kind of the world as well, but it's an interesting read and and provocative read as well.
Yes. The second is, do you take long or short lunch breaks?
Very short. I actually work here. I actually lunch here while working, which is not a good practice. Not good practice.
Yes. And the third one, Bitcoin. Are you a believer or a non-believer?
That's a difficult one. I would say I'm a believer in cryptocurrency.
Do you own any Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency?
I don't.
Well, that's good enough. You answer already. Thank you.
I own, and it's more. I own energy efficient cryptocurrency. So that's kind of my current bet.
Okay, that's it then, my friends. Thank you so much for doing this. We have to do it again some other time.
That's right, and with a glass of wine as well.
Yes.